South Africa, at the end of apartheid in 1994, transition to democracy, had unusually high levels of poverty for middle-income countries. And that was, at the time, quite easily understood in terms of the effects of apartheid, which had discriminated systematically against the country's black majority. So it wasn't surprising there was very high levels of poverty, malnutrition, low life expectancy, and so on. After apartheid, poverty has persisted at a much higher level, really, than obviously people hoped at the time of transition. And the real driving force behind poverty in South Africa is unemployment. South Africa has exceptionally high unemployment rates of 40%. And this is really what drives poverty. There's also landlessness. People don't have access to land. So South Africa doesn't have a large peasantry, but it does have a large unemployed population, and that's the basis of contemporary poverty. If poverty in South Africa is the result of unemployment, long-term strategy really has to involve job creation. And this is a huge challenge. I mean, nowhere in the world has really, in the contemporary world, in the 2000s, successfully tackled the question of how do you create very large numbers of jobs for mostly less skilled or unskilled workers. So you can obviously invest in education and improve the skills of your workers. You can redistribute through cash transfers, which South Africa does on a very large scale with considerable effects in reducing poverty. But the real challenge is job creation. And that's a challenge where the South African state, since 1994, has failed abysmally, but it's hard to see the answers. Now, clearly, there's two, possibly three major solutions. One, you need stronger growth. So a large part of the poverty story in South Africa is about growth. But you also have to identify ways in which you will ensure that growth is job creating rather than simply leading to higher wages for the more skilled workers who already have jobs. That's a challenge. Land reform is also very important. It's probably a neglected part of the South African story. So some combination of labour-intensive job creation and land reform is probably the answer. I'm not sure about the role of the MDGs in the South African context, but social protection is very important, the social protection of floor. At the moment, about 1 in 3 South Africans get a government pension or grant, social assistance programs. These are very large. South Africa spends more on social assistance than any other major country in the global south, 3.5% of GDP, and this has a huge effect on reducing poverty amongst categories of deserving poor, the elderly, poor people with children, the disabled especially. So those categories of deserving poor are to a significant extent provided for. The real challenge is what to do about the very large numbers of people of working age who are unemployed and don't have land and don't have work. At the moment, there's no social protection floor for them, and introducing a social protection floor for them would be very controversial. There has been discussion of a basic income grant in South Africa, but it's, the political elite is really quite strongly opposed to that. In the short term, social protection floor would really mean an expansion of public employment programs, and that's difficult in terms of the administrative capacity of the state.